Hey, it's Nikki.
And it's Brie.
And we're
Late to the Party,
a podcast about the film, fashion, and pop culture that's shaped us into the weirdos that we are. And today we are discussing the sad girl biopic, Sofia Coppola's Priscilla. And joining us today is Anne, Sullivan, and Winsor Jewell from Feminine Features. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you for coming on. So we love your podcast and we love chick flicks, obviously. But your podcast kind of dives deeper into chick flicks and giving them the flowers and the reverence that it deserves. But why chick flicks?
When we started the podcast, me and Winsor went to film school together, and I sort of had this sense when I was there that I didn't quite belong because I hadn't seen some of like the great movies that I was supposed to have seen, you know, like Raging Bull or like Rocky or those kind of things. I can only come up with boxing movies,
Other non-boxing
other non-boxing movies. But then, you know, I just kind of realized that, you know, if there is a movie that I enjoy that's intended for me, like it is good, it is worth talking about. And so like we wanted to dive into chick flicks and talk about like why they are, you know, not only like good in their own sense, but like in a lot of ways better because they deal with like interpersonal conflict a lot more than like, you know, a Marvel movie might, or like, you know, some other big blockbuster, like typical man movie, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you can do like a whole movie podcast and like never talk about a movie directed by women, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and that's a huge problem. And so, you know, by focusing on that, we really get to explore so much new stuff and see, you know, delve into the kind of movies that usually aren't talked about with the kind of critical lens we like to try to give them.
Yeah.
Awesome. And definitely Sofia Coppola is one of those directors for sure. Like she's never really been nominated besides Lost in Translation for an Oscar, and she gets overlooked time and time again, especially with Priscilla. So
And she, you know, keeps getting better. And it's exactly the kind of, and we end up on so many directors that like direct a masterpiece and never get to make another movie. So, you know, we have to take Sofia Coppola as a win, even if she's not like winning, you know, best director at the Oscars. At least she gets to keep making movies. Like that's huge, you know, in the kind of realm of people we talk about.
definitely. It's funny you guys were talking about college. I took like a female studies class, like women's studies class, and it was all about chick flicks.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
And it really stuck with me because chick flicks really can span from like a Halloween to like a proper chick flick.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's a lot of what we're finding is that like chick flick, it's not so much a genre as it is like a descriptor of like who the film is intended for, or like a lot of times we also talk about movies that are like weren't necessarily like intended for women. Like we did Titanic, which was like a disaster film really, but it's very much been co-opted by women because it also has that so much of that romantic element to it.
I never thought about that perspective. That's a good point. Yeah. Huh.
The audience really does get to shape a lot. Like after you put your art out, the audience really defines a genre, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are you guys' thoughts on Sofia Coppola just in general?
I mean, very talented. You know, I like, it seems like a lot of her movies kind of have this blue and pink color scheme, which I thought was really interesting. And like, we talk a lot about like sometimes the only way we know a chick flick is like a chick flick is because the marketing's pink, which is like a super weird way to look at it. But like we did Grease recently, and like Jenna had a lot of pushback because like Grease is a musical. It wasn't intended for like any sort of even movie audience, but like specifically it wasn't like made for women. It was like a musical. Like that was when like people would go out to musicals much more, and like that was sort of a culture. And then, but we're talking about it, and I'm like, well, the thing is, what is it on Paramount? Yeah. What, like when you go to watch Grease, like today, you go on Paramount Plus, the marketing's pink. And like, I don't mean to, we never mean to take away like the fact that like if we consider something a chick flick, that doesn't mean people who aren't women can't enjoy it, of course. But like, there is definitely like looking back, I guess the marketing department of Paramount is like, oh yeah, that's for women. We want women to remember to watch this movie, so we're gonna market to them. But yeah, with Sofia Coppola, like she definitely uses that pink and blue color scheme a lot, which I think is really cool because it is like, it is just the boy and girl dynamic that like obviously outdated, but like it is like colors are meant to remind us of something, to bring up themes. And like I think it's really interesting that like chick flicks have to deal with gender in a way that like movies for men or just like in general don't. And so like you're always going to get that. And so like to bring that color into your movie and like remind you of like with Priscilla, there is so much gender dynamics in it between her and Elvis. So like I love that the colors are reflected. And also pink and blue, honestly, like favorite color scheme in a movie. I feel like it just like always looks good.
I mean, aesthetically speaking, Sofia Coppola really like is A++. Every film she does, she has a very distinctive style.
Yeah, I love her visual style and that she's willing to take her time with it. I feel like a lot of flashy directors, even from when she was starting up in the late '90s, will like focus on fast cuts. I'm thinking like Tarantino and stuff like that. Even Wes Anderson, and she's really, really, really able to take like a domestic scene and give it time to breathe in a way that a lot of her peers did not. And
I love that.
Yeah,
like the quiet moments. Sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's like what makes her resonate. You can't watch a movie of hers and like not think about it the next day. There's always going to be something to kind of peel back, and to do that with also this kind of luscious visual style, it really makes her seem kind of otherworldly in a way.
And like with this movie where it is like a story about a rock star and his wife, like to like really slow that down is kind of crazy. I saw this movie in theaters when it came out, and I kind of spent the whole movie like being like, when is it going to start? But like, I think a lot of times you'll watch movies like that and you'll like come away with like, oh, that was bad. Like that, I never knew when it was going to get started. But like this was a lot more of like, oh, like the whole thing is she's sort of waiting for her life to start. So like it just kind of feels right, Yeah.
Not to jump to the ending, but when she drives off at the end, that is the real beginning. Is the way I interpreted it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
We were just watching the Virgin Suicides just in between episode, like before we came on, and doing so much of that movie from the perspective of the boys, doing this movie just in the time that she knows Elvis. She's so like brave when she comes up with a concept for a movie, and that's really impressive. As far as like being a director willing to take full control of a movie, she is never afraid of taking a risk with what the totality of a piece is going to be like.
Yeah, I feel like she has a really strong voice, and because she's confident in that voice, like she can take these risks and like tell stories that we wouldn't normally tell. Yeah, like the Virgin Suicides, like telling that from the man's perspective, and like it's all about like how women are like objects and like for men, and so like being able to tell that story from a woman's perspective. And like, well, tell that story from a woman's perspective, from a man's perspective is like, I think really smart. And we were just talking about Lost in Translation because that's my least favorite kind of movie, which is a man's middle life crisis movie. And I'm like, I hate that. And Windsor's like, but you love when women talk about it. I was like, well, I didn't mind when a woman talked about it. So like, she's got something. Yeah. But like, I've seen almost all of her feature films. I haven't seen what is it, Nowhere, and I haven't seen On the Rocks. Or is it Somewhere?
It's Somewhere. And it's
Somewhere.
very good.
Okay.
Very slow, and also about almost midlife crisis.
Oh man.
And the lead is Stephen Dorff. So I don't know.
Well, it's not a rave review, but I do like Sofia Coppola, so maybe I'll check it out. But she kind of has this take both in like Virgin Suicides and Priscilla, and I think also
The Beguiled?
The Beguiled, sure. What was the other one I was going to talk about though? Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
Like she has this like wonderful perspective on teen stupidity, like teen girl stupidity, because like, you know, we always expect our teen girls to grow up so much faster than boys and like not make those mistakes. And so I like watching Elvis from the perspective of like, wow, like they really let that girl have too much like her parents let her have too much power in making this decision.
Definitely.
And like, no, that man is 8 years older than you. Like that's not happening, you know?
Yeah, like the parents, they're like, oh, I don't know, you shouldn't be doing this, but then they still let her kind of go off, and
Yeah.
I'm like,
It's
what?
Elvis, baby. It's the 1950s. I mean, it's like from that context, but I do agree with you guys from 2024. It's like, oh, that's grooming 101, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if you want to get into that about this movie, it is so like a beat by beat rundown of grooming in a way that is, you know, I mean, that's the whole movie.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And the way that it comes off in such a manner that you're not shocked that Priscilla Presley signed off on the movie. You're like, yeah, she probably just, that's like how she remembers it. And it feels so much like an SVU episode doing like ear beats, but it's what happened.
But even to this day, Priscilla Presley has nothing but love for Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to think she signed off on this film and loves Sophia and loves this film and executive produced it.
Mm-hmm.
But then also she was a part of Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann Elvis, and, you know, had Graceland forever. And
it just goes to show, you know, how quiet Sofia Coppola can make a movie, you know, and like how to the facts it can be. You know, it's you come in and you say that's obviously grooming. The movie is not telling you what that is. It is not walking you through it. It's just taking its time to present that in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What did you guys think of the controversy surrounding this film? And at Lisa Marie Presley, before she died, she didn't really have kind words. And I personally felt like this film was very non-judgmental and just showed it from Priscilla's perspective. But I didn't read any of the crazy controversial things in this movie like some did.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we live in such a weird time where like fame is everywhere and like being famous, we're starting to really realize the consequences of it. And so like I definitely can understand like why she would not want this out there. And like, you know, it is weird because because Elvis and Priscilla were like such figures, like public figures, we like feel this entitlement to them. And it's like, you know, do we really necessarily deserve that? Maybe not. But at the same time, like, the Elvis movie came out a year ago, and I think it was very important to get this as like another perspective because personally, I loved the Elvis movie. Like the reason I picked.
Me too.
Who did Elvis better, Austin Butler or Jacob Elordi?
I mean,
that's a great question.
They both just like they both just have that like complex of like Austin stuck in Elvis voice, and like Jacob Elordi is like, oh, I like Elvis because of Lilo and Stitch, right? Isn't that what he said?
Yeah.
So like they both have like the narcissism that's like so needed. I guess I'm more partial to Austin's Elvis because it's a much kinder representation, and I'm like, no, I want to be obsessed with Elvis, so so I'd rather that than Jacob Elordi's like hulking like throwing chairs,
unsettling Elvis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm highly critical of Elvis, so I did prefer Jacob Elordi's performance. Both are extremely different in a way that's like fascinating. The most stark difference being they actually shoot in Graceland for both movies, and so you like can see the same room with the same people dressed in the same costumes, and it's such a difference. I think it's really interesting as like a film test of like it is all interpretation. Like there is no truth in either movie. You know, like it's not going to look like what it looked like. You just simply can represent what happened to these people, and you can either do it with a really funny Tom Hanks voice or a breakdown of like what Priscilla Presley's life.
Oh my gosh, Tom Hanks.
I would love a crossover of like Baz Luhrmann's like the Colonel, played by Tom Hanks, and him some way interwoven in Priscilla would have just been Chef's
was
kiss.
waiting for him to show up at the end. I was like, it's gonna be a great button when he comes in doing his snowman speech at the end. It's funny Dutch accent.
That was the only thing missing from this film. Definitely. The
Definitely.
Colonel.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never see the Colonel.
Mm-mm.
That's why I thought he was gonna pop up as Tom Hanks. I was positive in the fat
What a
suit.
letdown.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, they do have that one mention of the Colonel when he's like, "Stop with the religion," which is just like, I don't know. I really like that scene because, you know, at that point she really realizes that like best way for her to like live is just to not put up any sort of fight, and like that's really heartbreaking. But also like the Colonel seems nice because she's like, oh yeah, well there are people looking out for my husband because like he was, you know, not well, and like she did care about him. So when you are powerless in this relationship and you can't look out for your significant other, I guess it's nice that like the Colonel's around sometimes.
I loved that scene when she overhears the Colonel talking to Elvis about the yogi books and the religion, and she just like smirks as she like walks on by.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
good. There is some comedy to this movie. Like speaking of Jacob Elordi's performance, I saw a lot of comical moments.
Yeah.
I mean, I laughed when they started burning the books, just because it's such a dramatic way to break down, be like, oh, I guess I can't get into religious extra stuff anymore. So I'm just
The
gonna start burning all
Jesus in the bedroom too. That Jesus
Jesus in the
statue.
bedroom scared the shit out of me. No wonder this man's not having sex with her. Just staring little
Wild.
Jesus in the eye. I like
But that
the
tiger though.
tiger. Yeah, exactly.
That
That's
could
what
stay.
the acid trip tiger. That would freak me out.
Yeah.
But it was fun. That scene was like funny.
Yeah, no, the acid trip, I feel like that's the best directed drug scene I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because so often they're like, whoa, drugs. And it's like, okay, it's like really not that crazy, you know?
Yeah. It does make him look like silly too a bit.
True. But I feel like she uses a lot of like smart practical effects instead of like taking it all into doing special effects. And like that makes it feel a lot more like true to life where it's like, whoa, yes, shadows are crazy, you
Yeah.
know? And that's like the part about doing acid where it's like, yeah, you're on acid when you're like, wow, shadows, you know? So
The tiger's whispering in your ear.
What I loved was him becoming pink. Was to me very true to life to taking acid and just seeing some like staring at somebody's face.
Yeah. Well, we weren't on acid, but we were high the other day, and there were these cop cars, like cop lights behind, and like silhouettes of people in this frosted window, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy how beautiful this is. So like, yeah, when our director's like, yeah, like visually, like, you know, drugs make you think those like weird thoughts where you're like, light is beautiful. I want to see that, you know. I feel like it's smart and it's beautiful.
I mean, that's a genius of Sophia.
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
She takes little moments and makes them big, and big moments and makes them like super
Yeah,
small
it's-
and insular.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Well, before we get off the Sophia tip, so I was thinking watching Priscilla because we saw it in the theater, but then we watched it again last night at home. And there's so many Sofia Coppola isms in this film. Like, I think this is almost like a sister film to Marie Antoinette in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Like I was saying, I think she has this really smart idea about like teenage girl stupidity and like yeah, Marie Antoinette and Priscilla are, you know, really like sisters in time and like, you know, they are the woman next to this figurehead who's like probably a pretty bad guy. And just like how do you as someone with like actually next to no power in that situation, how are you like liable and like how are you a victim in your own right and like telling that kind of story and like I think she in a way that certainly a male director and like definitely probably not a lot of female directors either could like approach just with like the empathy of like yeah you are a victim but also like the criticism of like don't follow a boy you know because sometimes we need to remember that too not to victim blame but you know be smart when you can.
Definitely. I mean, I love the way in this and Marie Antoinette, she really, without saying too much, really lets you know these are both 14-year-old girls.
Yep.
Yeah. She does nail that home. Like,
And incredible casting. Like you believe both what is her name? Kaylee Spaney and also Kristen Dunst are 14 and then later in the film like much older. They're just like ageless actresses. Like how do you even do that? It's incredible.
I couldn't believe Kaylee Spaney's like 26 and she played 14. Like she just looked and embodied all the awkward, like falling in love with Elvis of a 14-year-old. It blew my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it does help that Jacob Elordi's literally like 7 feet tall. It's like, yeah, everyone's a child next to him.
true.
But, yeah.
What did we think of that? Because in real life, Priscilla Presley's 5'4" and Elvis was 6 feet. So not like as jarring as I think Jacob Elordi's 6'5" and she's 5'1". But I liked it. I thought it was very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much about like a theme of this is just like her making herself small, both like emotionally and like her voice is so quiet. And when you hear her like not use that like little timid voice for the first time, you're like, oh no, like that woman is trapped. And like it's nice that there's someone else in there that like has her own ambitions and all. But like it's also heartbreaking then to hear her go back, like especially the scene where she's having dinner with her friends in the casino and then she's like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to go up to his room, and she has like her normal voice, and then as soon as she gets in the room with him, she's just like, hi, what's wrong? And you're like, oh, please have that power. But yeah, so making herself small and like in that, and just like not having her opinions really known, and just making him comfortable, but then also like physically just to have this like lurking man who has like caused you physical harm before. Yeah, visually that's quite powerful and like helps sell the like terror behind that, because like Sofia is so subtle and like we're not seeing a whole lot of like abuse with like a capital A in this movie. Like obviously like the chair throwing, him hitting her, like him yelling at her. These are all terrible, awful things to see. But to like kind of go about it more subtly, I think is very smart, because abuse can occur in so many different ways and we want to be able to show light to all of those different ways, and also just so that this film is more palatable for like people who like may have been victims and may have some trauma and not want to like see all that. I think is smart. And yeah, it just, there's nothing wrong with wanting to create a more watchable experience, in my opinion. I think movies should be entertaining. So like using Jacob Elordi's height as like the scary thing instead of like actual like physical abuse, I think is a smart way to go about it.
I feel like it also leaves you like room for imagination, because if you're just seeing like these little things, you're like, well, what else have we not seen behind the closed doors?
Yeah.
I also took it as Elvis being just larger than life. I think at one, it's either in the film or just doing research on it, Priscilla thinking like Elvis is God, essentially. Everyone else thinking that as well.
Said that too, like in interviews.
Right. What is that part where where he's talking about religion and he's talking about Jesus, and he's sort of like he sort of like implies like what he's like, the woman at the well, like was she did Elvis want to sleep with her, or did Jesus? See, I just did it. Like there's just like he kind of ties himself to being like a messianic figure in a way where you're like, oh yeah, like he definitely thinks he's God, and like other people do too. But yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And like, I don't know, like Elvis was like kind of the first big celebrity, like, that was like before there was like television was like as commonplace as it is now, before like, a lot of big bands were able to release as much music, like that was just getting started. So it's like, yeah, I think being along the king. Being along for that ride is like, no one really knows how to deal with it. And certainly not Priscilla or like the people around Elvis, and Elvis himself is like, doesn't know how to deal with his fame.
Definitely. It's crazy to think of Elvis being that huge figure because, like Jacob Elordi, I'm like, oh, Elvis, Lilo and Stitch or like whatever,
Yep.
a couple times I turned to Brie and I was like, Jacob Elordi sounds like Johnny Bravo. And I'm like, but that's just a take on Elvis. I don't know.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost prefer him doing that rather than Austin Butler kind of getting all method with it and being stuck because like he's such a
Yeah.
cartoon character of history. Like you really don't need to be like going above and beyond to get the subtleties of Elvis. Like you get the voice, you look kind of tall, like, you're good.
I mean, I feel like it makes sense in Baz Luhrmann's film, like more than like I like how Sofia Coppola doesn't make these people like characters, like they seem more human, I guess. And in Baz Luhrmann's film, I mean, it's just so over the top.
And Baz Luhrmann's film is like all crowds, right? And it's like where he was famous. These are the big moments of his fame. And this movie so specifically avoids those and like only has crowds at points where they're almost like inappropriate, like outside of the birth of Lisa and, outside of the front gate. And, it uses them almost more as like these kind of like frightening things rather than these celebratory, masses.
It's Priscilla's point of view too. And it's like Elvis and Priscilla behind closed doors. Like what happens? Like even the opening shot of her with her toes and doing the signature eye, it's just so intimate. And you're kind of on this ride of like, you're going to be stuck in Graceland. And this is her story. And I love how even like talking about how he's kind of predatory, we don't see certain elements. I love that because from Priscilla's perspective, it seems like she only remembers certain bits and pieces. And this is like a memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So back to the casting of Kaylee Spaney. What do we think of her as Priscilla?
I mean, I thought she was really good, and I thought the being able to make that change from like smaller to like having a whole personality, but like still making it very obvious that it's the same character, and it's also a switch that she's doing where we're not like watching her grow into this person this whole movie. We like have most of the movie where she's very small and timid. And then we sort of just jump ahead to when she's like, oh, I'm gonna like have a life for myself. I'm gonna start taking karate lessons or
I love that. I love when she's like, I'm gonna do me phase and just I don't know, lets her hair kind of grow out and
I was saying she just wants to be an LA girly and like she's stuck running around being stuck in Nashville. And then like her with her friends just before she goes and meets with Elvis is one of my favorite parts because she does feel so out of her shell in a way that is like very impressive for Kaylee Spaney to portray.
I love the transformation because we meet Priscilla in the 50s in Germany, the 14-year-old girl doing homework at the diner. And her hair is like in a side pony and she has like a little hoop skirt and a cardigan. And we see her, her hair get bigger, her eyes get bigger, and then go back to like 1970s, like bohemian. It's a fascinating transformation.
When she loses the beehive, it's a very like, that's a critical moment. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
What are our thoughts on Priscilla's look? Because in my opinion, that's the only thing Elvis ever got right. He has an eye for aesthetics.
He does. And I've been
Oh my God.
everyone's talking about their like color season right now. I feel like he was ahead of the curve with that.
Stacey London who? Clinton Kelly who?
Yeah. No, I mean her looks were fantastic both in real life and in this film. One thing that I noticed was I was looking at the poster and the poster's like Priscilla and like the last A goes into her eyeliner and I was like, are you kidding me? That is so sick. So yeah, it's really interesting. Like, I mean, I don't know all that much about like the music history and like of all that, but where we are getting these rock stars that are, and I guess she's not a rock star, but doing this like very performative makeup. Like you're not wearing this if you're a normal person and you're certainly not wearing this like out of the house.
Right. Like when she puts on like those lashes just to give birth, you know, she's like doing her hair up all crazy.
Yeah. Well,
Not
I mean,
realistic.
so much of their relationship, I think she realizes pretty early on, is performative. And so like having the perfect hair, makeup, all that is so much of like playing this persona and playing Elvis's wife. So yeah, the fact that it's big and then gets smaller is like very telling, I think.
And it gets really big. It's like,
Oh,
Oh,
the
what is
BS.
she? Yeah.
And it's like distracting in scenes. You're like, it's hard to like focus on this person as a person when you're just staring at the hair.
It's true. So iconic though.
No, it's the iconography of it all. Like, you know Elvis, but you also know Priscilla Presley's look.
yeah, for sure.
It's almost ironic, you know, in a way that like Elvis was like, oh, to be like the perfect, in today's world, we call it like a rock star girlfriend aesthetic. You have to like dye your hair black like mine and kind of match with me. But in turn, she became an icon in her own right.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, yeah, and it is like, obviously the like him wanting her to dress a certain way was like a huge form of manipulation and like him laying claim to her and like make the way that they would match. Um, and like obviously that one dress where he's like, that dress is nothing for you, and she's like, okay, I'll fucking return it. And like us seeing her like have a break for like the first time was like, and him just laugh it off, is really telling about their relationship.
Well, that scene where they're defining the look, and it's all of his friends just watching her and oogling
Yeah, that was
her.
weird.
The Memphis Mafia, as they called them.
This mafia. Yeah, it's really terrifying.
Hmm.
And just she's so on display. And that's what makes the quiet performance, I think, so kind of heart-wrenching at times, especially when she's doing her makeup before giving birth. It's just like she is so aware that she will be on display at any moment. And whether or not she's comfortable with that, like it is a sad reality to like that's what you're worried about during the birth of your child. Going into labor. It's
As
and
a
it's
5'1" girly, though, Big Prince or no. They do swallow you. Elvis is right.
Elvis is right, but he's using it as a form of control.
And well, I don't know. I think there's definitely like a conversation to be had about like if you like, we all know, I mean, I think most women have this experience of knowing like what works for them and like certain things, like whether it's not wearing patterns or like, oh, don't wear these colors, so such and such. So like there is this way where we all try to fit the mold, and like at the same time it's like if you enjoy wearing prints and you don't look good in them, like wear prints if you want,
Yeah.
and so like I think there's like a way for every woman to kind of relate to that of like, why do I always have to look good? And why do we put so much emphasis on how we look? And yeah.
Circling back to Marie Antoinette, I find it fascinating that one of the most iconic scenes in Marie Antoinette is the shopping scene. I want candy.
Oh, yes.
And it's almost her in defiance and getting her own autonomy. And this is the exact opposite. This is her being like, I will do whatever.
Yeah, it's like not a fun montage of like
No.
fits.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is kind of disappointing. Like this is kind of sad.
Right. In contrast to almost every other fashion shopping montage, it's scary.
Yeah, we in the chick flicks that we've covered, like one thing that we do notice as like a chick flick staple is the makeover scene. And we've seen it in like Mean Girls, and we've seen it in Clueless as like a way to form a person into like your image of them. So it's like I really loved seeing it in Priscilla, where it's just like, oh, like we know who the Regina George is here, and it's Elvis, and like
Yeah.
like it's so much darker,
Right.
and like because in that like relationship dynamic, like he feels like he has ownership over her. Yeah, so I thought it was an excellent scene, and I'm like, does that make Priscilla a chick flick? Yeah, I think it does.
Is every Sofia Coppola film a chick flick. I mean, she tackles girlhood in a way no one else does.
Yeah,
Lost in Translation would be tough.
I bet. Yeah, I
So it's
just
on the rocks.
yeah.
Oh, On the Rocks for sure. It's not.
But she has such a voice.
Yeah, and I mean, Lost in Translation is a romance, so like for some people that's enough. Like, you know, we kind of use a fluid definition, and if there, we more want to cover the conversation of like what it means to be a chick flick more than it like define like yes, this one is, this one isn't. So like yeah, if we ever covered Lost in Translation, wouldn't be my favorite conversation, but I would certainly have it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it does capture the female experience, which that's how I view chick flicks. But
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
there's so much wiggle room. I think that's so fascinating about like the what is a chick flick conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like it could be interpreted so many ways. Like,
Yeah. The Beguiled as well is like definitely one where you don't think of it as a chick flick because it's like a horror. We recently did 3 different action movies that we wanted to talk about as chick flicks because like when you're talking about genres that are like intended for women, like women are almost always left out of action, and like we talked about how this continues to be a problem in Hollywood and like execs do not know how to deal with it, and like frankly I don't even know what I want from that, like what I want as an action movie for that is like marketed towards me and I can see myself as a hero in it. So like The Beguiled is not an action movie. It is, however, like a horror, which is another genre that is like, you know, so often we have these tropes in horror where it's like women are being like molested or like, you know, there's so much violence towards women already in the world, and then like to enhance it with like these horrible movies, like these horrific movies, it can leave a lot of women out of that genre, out of the horror genre. So like to see The Beguiled where it's it's a horror movie that is like for women and I think hits harder for women than it would for men because it is about like being polite to a person who is threatening you. I'm like, that's the female experience, like you said. So yeah, I would definitely consider The Beguiled chick flick. It would be a fun one to cover, I think.
Absolutely.
I've never seen it actually, so
I love it. It has all your faves, Brie.
It does?
Nicole Kidman, Kiki
Oh.
Dunst, Elle Fanning.
yeah.
Yeah,
True.
my faves as well. I love those girls.
They're like Sophia's girls, and now
Yeah.
Kaylee Spaney, maybe.
I know.
Oh.
Maybe she'll be in another project with
Fingers
her.
crossed. I don't know. Who's to say?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. What's y'all's favorite Sofia Coppola film?
I love Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
I love a period piece for the costumes, for the set design. So yeah, Marie Antoinette for sure is like a favorite. And it's so fun. Like there's so many scenes where you're just there having fun. Like another thing that we end up running into a lot on talking about chick flicks is like the consumerism of it all. Like we just talked about like the shopping scenes, like that's coming up over and over again because like women are such a large market and like because marketing teams can like prey on our insecurities, they're able to like make more money off of us. So like there is like a consumerist theme in a lot of chick flicks. Legally Blonde, we got retail therapy, all these sorts of things, just like grand houses in so many of them. So like I feel like I phrased that as a criticism, and like there's definitely something to it, but also it sure is fun to like have a lot of money or like watch someone spend a lot of money and like live a lavish life and like live vicariously through them. So
Yeah.
is there anything better than being royalty?
True. I feel like Sophia plays with that concept too, like lavish lifestyles, like
From her own experience. I mean,
Yeah.
growing up on film sets and extravagant parties, being Francis Ford Coppola's daughter, she knows it better than anyone, the isolation and also like the weird dynamics of fame.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I would say my favorite's probably The Virgin Suicides. It's teenagers scare me very much. And so when you see a movie that really cuts to the core of kind of that experience and the history of it, I find it to be, extremely compelling, like first movie. And she takes so many risks, and I find that really fascinating. And it's a gorgeous little movie that really makes me think about things I don't want to think about very often, like
It's a
teenage.
banger of a first film.
Absolutely, absolutely, it's stunning debut,
It always blows my mind that that was just her first film.
Yeah.
'Cause it's so good.
and she's very young when she made it. It's not something you see very often.
It's like truly an inspiration. She definitely does Nepo babies good. Like having all the resources and having that like career pivot from being like a nebulous, Nepo baby fashion designer / model to being like, I want to direct. I've read this book that Sonic Youth Thurston Moore gave me, and I want to make it into a movie. It's epic.
Yeah, the '90s rock music really just keeps bleeding into kind of everything she does, and
I love that.
nobody else breaks it down quite like she does. I mean, she really gets to the core of what was valuable there, and I think very few people who lived through that era as like big grunge folks really were able to take that into the subsequent decades in a way that she did.
Good. I'm so for that.
Yes, thank God we got Sophia as the only one really keeping the torch alive. Yeah, I love that movie. But I always think that like her father started kind of taking from her just because she is always, especially his most recent couple decades of movies. I think he finds what's impressive in her work and tries to put it in because he was really lost in the woods in the late '90s. And so, even as a Nepo baby, she was able to be in conversation with this, the most, I mean, I don't know that they're the Coppola families without her at all, like as they are such a dynasty and so many of them did work before The Virgin Suicides, but after they were really, royalty. Like, now they all have to make a movie.
100%. I mean, have you guys seen Gia Coppola's Palo Alto?
I haven't seen Palo Alto.
Oh no, I did watch a trailer for it just a while ago. Yeah.
Really good.
It is really good.
And you can see, I was going to say, you can definitely see the influence, like
Mhm.
Sophia's influence.
Yeah, sure.
Would we have Jason Schwartzman without Sofia Coppola?
I mean, definitely. Would he be as likable? I don't know.
Or my man, what's his name? Robert Schwartzman?
Yeah, he was in this. We were looking. No, he's not in this. He's in Virgin Suicide. So we were watching. I was like, who the hell is that kid? I'm like, oh, right. It's Jason Schwartzman's brother.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And she works with her brother Roman a lot. I love that it's a family affair. And all the wines.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, back to you were mentioning the music. Sofia Coppola is known for her needle drops and just use of music in general. And in this film, her husband Thomas Mars of the band Phoenix, he helped with originally the score and then kind of just produced the music for it. But what did we think of the music in Priscilla? Since they couldn't use Elvis songs.
Well, what I loved the most is the musical, the instrumental Love Me Tender. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. And I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like they actually had a couple different versions with different tempos. And it definitely was like, a through line of like, their love throughout the whole movie. But then like, what does that feel like in this moment? And like, is it terrifying? Is it sad? Is it like actually pretty exciting? Like, it's just a really smart way to like tie everything together. I did not realize that's what I was listening to until I watched it this time because I had the subtitles on and it was like instrumental of Love Me Tender. And I was like, oh, that is what it is. I think my favorite instance of it being used is after Lisa Marie is born. And like, they don't really get into it and in this movie, but like you definitely like start to see the cycle of abuse with like he has another woman in his life, his like daughter now, and like she will be, when you groom your wife, it's weird to then have a daughter because like he wants her so much to be his like little doll and like be, a trophy wife and sit next to him and like make him look good. So to have like another and a child this time well, child the first time, frankly,
Yep.
but
True.
a younger child, a baby this time, like have to like step into that role that her mother was in. Like it was, for me, I was like, yeah, the musical score, like bringing that all together, and like it was being played like sort of a lullaby, but also like had that like eeriness to it that I was like, that's terrifying. So I thought the music was incredible.
Yeah, I Shazammed the score for when he reveals the engagement ring because it sounded so familiar, but it must just be from either the trailer for this or something because I found it was just the score for this movie, but I find it to be so hypnotic what they use. And, a sign of a great director is like she gets this challenge, right? She can't use Elvis music. And so she makes it feel like a choice. And even when you have
Yes.
the trailer line of like, who are the kids listening to nowadays? And she lists some other 50s artist and then you. And it's like, right, we have this movie about how totemic this guy is, about how huge he is. And it's filled with music from the same era that's amazing. That's not him. And like it helps kind of be like, this is an era, especially if you've seen Baz Luhrmann's movie, that this is an era that he is a person in and not definitive of. Even though that's kind of how we look back on it. Like there is a world of music and film and life outside of Elvis. And the music is kind of hinting that at you as she is further and further entrapped in Elvis's life.
Yeah, I feel like it worked better. It worked out for Sophia.
Mhm.
Like I think it does. Like it's more powerful this way without the Elvis music.
Yeah, it unintentionally becomes like a Sofia Coppola-ism in itself because like Marie Antoinette, who when for that she used a lot of like New Order and the Strokes, and that was very against time. It like bended time and in this it does as well. Like I noticed the needle drop in the beginning when she's falling in love of Crimson and Clover, which like obviously didn't come out until later, but it like doesn't matter. It's just how you feel, and that artistic liberty I think is very cool. It doesn't have to just be like a traditional biopic where you have to do every song from the period.
Yeah.
Especially with her visual style being so kind of fluid and presentational that you're not like, here I am on the streets in 1959. Like you are experiencing this story, and so it doesn't matter when the music's from. It just matters that it fits the piece that you're watching.
Yeah, I think also to contrast with Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, where he like Baz so much wants to like commemorate Elvis's music, to like then have this movie where we're trying to like not look at him as like an idol and like an icon and actually like a very complex and often morally corrupt person, to like take his music out of it and be like, hey, yeah, we're not gonna like act like these are the only songs we could possibly put in this movie. I think is a really smart choice.
Also, Priscilla in 1962 is not just going to be listening to Elvis, especially if she knows him personally.
Yeah, she's probably heard plenty just around.
Yeah. Well, and apparently too, like this movie includes Frankie Avalon's Venus. And apparently, according to Priscilla's autobiography that this is based on, she really loved that song, and that was her vibe. So I love that it's included.
Yeah, I think there's also, this element of like her jealousy, her like, warranted jealousy, but her jealousy is like a consistent theme in this, and not knowing who these songs are written about would be really hurtful. So like, especially if there's like, I can't think of any line that would be like not about her, but like just to like listen to a song and be like, oh, did my husband write this about me? I don't know. Like, it seems like it'd probably be a tough experience.
Yeah, like I'm trying to remember like the name and that. Like she found like a note in like his jacket. Scooby. Yes.
Because that was in real life one of his nicknames for Anne Margaret.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did not know that. That makes so much sense. No wonder she was extra pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just was like, who, you can name a girl Scooby? That's crazy. I might do that. Yeah.
I don't know. This movie, it makes me so mad. And like, I feel like there's so many red flags and signs along the way. Like that first letter when she meets Elvis, even like in his room. And it's like, you can tell he's like just stopping in these cities, you know, meeting girls and then leaving, you know, having love affairs, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and that's what makes it so obvious she's 14. You know, that all of this seems like, oh, fantastic. Like he's getting letters from all these girls and here he is talking to me. And it's like
Yeah.
that is what a 14-year-old would think in that situation.
Yeah, and you know, the he needs me kind of thing, that like so heartbreaking. Because of like, you know, fine. That's obviously what a teenager is gonna think, but like it's watching it as an adult, you're just like, yeah, no, hun, you're 8 years younger than him. You were a freshman in high school. Like, honestly, no offense, but nobody needs you. Like,
Yeah.
just like not to be cruel, but like,
Don't be cruel.
yeah. But like that's you know, that's what I really got out of this watch, is because there's this, you know, that time where her dad is like, why do you like my daughter? And he like kind of is just like, well, these are the things that she does for me. And it's like, okay, I feel like that's not specific to like her at all, you know?
Yeah.
Well, she's also malleable because she's 14. And he has mommy issues.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But also, I love the insecurity of her. Like, speaking about that, because just thinking, you know, he's, you know, rumored to have these affairs with like Nancy Sinatra and Anne Margaret. And she kind of should be insecure as like a 14-year-old. I mean, like, not to be on Elvis's side, not to be a men's rights activist. But, you know, she is up against some big competition as a random 14-year-old girl.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is unfair.
Yeah.
And to have that lead to her needing, like, ending up trapped as this doll in his house, being dressed
Yeah.
up by.
She really is just like a doll in the house. Like,
Well, you know, you want the outfits in this movie are so impeccable.
yeah,
And, like,
slay.
it's like watching a catalog go by. And so it does feel like this almost dollhouse that is scary.
Yeah,
You know?
I believe Stacey Batant, who did the costumes, she created over 100 looks for Kaylee Spaney. Just
and
custom made.
you know, everyone says something more about the character
Mm-hmm.
and about Priscilla's look evolving over time, and it's so purposeful.
I love when she wears pants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing also I want to mention, when they're doing the little boudoir shoot and she has all these like looks that like, but they're like still at that point it's like unclear whether or not they're having sex. So it is like even more of this like doll thing where it's like, oh, you're gonna dress up as a maid for what? For pictures? You're not even gonna like have a little sex after that? Like it's just kind of crazy. And so like the costumeness of like those couple scenes to me is like crazy, you know?
Yes. The movie makes it seem like you're watching a movie about a man in the closet.
Well, we went down this
I was
rabbit hole
about
last
to
night.
say, I turned to Nick and I said, you know what? Is Elvis in the closet? Because he gets way okay. They have like a pillow fight during this scene. Like I think it was this scene, and she doesn't like hit him that hard, but you know she hits him a little bit harder with a pillow, and he's like, and then he hits back like way harder, and you're like, holy shit! And he's like, I don't want to like be with a man or something. He says something about her being like a man, and it makes zero sense because it's like, dude, can you not handle a pillow fight? Like, what is wrong with you?
Giving one of the Wayans brothers in the Scary Movie when he's like, wear the football outfit. Not really.
It's like he's like right, and then so he's like, I need my little wife who fulfills exactly what I am looking for in a wife, that needs to match my outfits on magazine covers. And he's like, no, you don't look good in prints. Like it just feels like he is using her as a prop.
Definitely.
Yeah. Especially since like he has his was it Memphis Mafia,
He's
who's
always
like
hanging out with his boys.
clearly, you know, like, he makes time for her, who he respects their opinion. Like they can even they fight with him. So if he doesn't want to fight with a man, why is he always like
Why is he playing with men?
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
to Jailhouse Rock.
Yeah.
Well, of course, yes. I've always thought he was gay.
Yeah.
I did an Elvis jukebox musical in high school, who Jenna, our host who is in here, needed me to bring up, and the Elvis character in that is actually gay.
Oh.
And so I don't know if there was something in the water, but I've never heard that outside of these two pieces of media. But maybe it's just something about a man who's so famous for his outfits that people can't help but wonder.
Right.
It's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's
You know,
nothing on the internet. We've
Yeah.
Googled it. There's no secrets except Marlon Brando being like, "Meh, maybe."
What man did Marlon
His
Brando
gaydar.
not sleep with in the 50s? Straight by gay. He didn't care. He was hooking up with everybody.
More
true.
power to him.
Yeah, hell yeah.
hmm Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It is kind of such a funny conversation because there's so many men who are sexually attracted to women, but who don't like women.
Mhm.
And so, I don't know.
I think the movie says a lot more if you don't read him as gay. It just does a lot of things that one would traditionally read as gay.
I think there's definitely Sophia had some intention of like
Yeah.
at least like bringing that into the conversation because
I was gonna say that's another parallel to Marie Antoinette.
Oh yes.
right, yes.
Just saying. Like, was it Louis the 16th, I think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, that's yeah. And well, you were talking before we started recording that no man would ever make a movie about man not wanting to sleep with a woman, and like Marie Antoinette's about that. The Virgin Suicides, no. I can't. I don't know if the Virgin Suicides fits, but those two movies, yeah, where it is it's just like fascinating that we don't talk about this and like don't talk about like how it's used as manipulation in this movie, you know? Obviously, you know, to each their own, but yeah, that's a it's just a really
thought.
crazy way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That like because he just wanted her to be so pristine is kind of like sort of how I felt. I definitely like I'm not convinced one way or another that he was or wasn't gay, but like yeah, him wanting her to be this like virgin.
He was binded by religion for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like part of it, but like he didn't even really want to seem to sleep with her until after the marriage, you know? Like
That's what I found so fascinating.
yeah. Yeah, to me it was like, you know, he definitely had these ideas that are because of religion that like, you know, sex makes a woman dirty and like wanted to to keep her pristine. So that's like so fucking weird to me.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
Like the modern day equivalent a little bit is like Kanye West and
Uh-huh.
his like Kim Kardashian and now his new wife. This idea of like, oh, I'm gonna give you all these outfits and give you a makeover.
I thought about that too.
And the way he talked about Kim Kardashian and like sleeping with her and like kind of painted her as a whore after the fact,
Mm.
after, you know, they had children and everything. Just his weird complex is very Elvis coded.
It's about control, and it's about like in my mind's eye, I imagine myself here with a woman and perfectly shaping her to that purpose in a way that totally ignores the woman next to you. It's terrifying. Like the closest person to you is somebody you have torn the personality from.
Yeah. Yeah. I I recently saw Love Lies Bleeding, which is I really liked, but it's super gory and then it's like put next to lesbian sex and I was like kind of like trying to understand like why we're making this comparison in my head. And like I think it's because like lesbian sex has always been like so pornographic in film and so like contrasting it with like gross things like makes a lot of sense. It takes the viewer out of it and like tells them and it's not for them. Which I think is really smart. But like also like sex is gross. Like I think that like there is like this, you know, element of like, you know, vulnerability that like if he was trying to keep her perfect and like he was trying to like, you know, be this idol to her and to everyone else, like he could never have sex with her because then she would see him vulnerable and see him do those weird little things we end up doing during sex that are gross. Yeah, so I don't know.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about that now. I'm just like,
Sure,
my mind-
yeah.
Now I'm just thinking about Jacob Elordi naked. I'm not gonna lie.
And
That
I'm
was
like,
also my experience watching the movie.
Jacob Elordi, hot take, more attractive than Elvis?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that crazy?
I know, I feel crazy, but at least I'm not alone.
He's got like kind of a little boy face still, which I'm not like. I'm kind of into a man face as far as Elvis goes, but they're both cute. I think, yeah.
Elvis always had dead eyes. I was not a fan of.
Oh yeah, he does a little bit have a,
Yeah.
which Jacob Elordi can do sometimes, like the dead eyes. Like I feel like he does that look. Yeah, like in his character in Euphoria too. Give that stare.
But you know that kind of handsome softness that makes him so scary when he does his like serious stuff. When he starts throwing chairs at walls. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like bad, but when like Elvis in this film at his most like fuck boy, like when they're at the pool and he's like with the Memphis Mafia and he's like, "What's a Beatle?" Oh.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is he so hot when he acts like a misogynistic man? What's wrong with me?
Well, that's the scene where he's like most playing with his boys, so like
Yeah.
I get why that's hot. Like, he's actually feeling attraction in that scene.
Oh, you know, another. What did we think of Graceland? The aesthetics of Graceland in this film are just apparently very accurate and gorgeous.
My favorite part is the dog in the tiny fence. And like that kind of transitioning through the building down to the dog in the tiny fence that makes it feel, you know, and it is supposed to be, I think, this like pristine prison of like white walls and kind of classical architecture. And, you know, you can do whatever you want to as long as you stay within the fence. I mean, her playing with the dog out on the lawn is such a scene of like, she is not free here. And it's not something she knew going in. And then to have that done at such a gorgeous location that is also so garish. I don't know. Well, in Elvis, right, they have that hallway that is through most of what they use in Graceland. And they use that. My most memorable scene from that is all of the Elvis merch in that movie. And it feels so garish as a location. And like the first house you would buy if you were the richest man in the world at like 19. And to have that be the place where she's stuck in not her house that she did not design as this also famous, you know, young person. It feels very prison like.
Yeah, my one thing that I really appreciated about this was like how much they showed of the outdoors of Graceland. Because like you really remember that we're in Tennessee, you know? Like this is just the nicest house in Tennessee at the end of the day. And like I think I liked it because it like kind of let time pass in a way that like the Elvis movie didn't so much. Because you could see like the changing of the seasons and all that. And that was like, you know, it just felt more realistic than Elvis did. Although, you know, Elvis was not going for realism.
Oh no. But I mean, what Sofia Coppola does so well, like in Marie Antoinette, it's, you know, this young girl, lonely and bored in such a grand space. Marie Antoinette in Versailles, Priscilla in Graceland. And like the irony too is Graceland is still the same. Her duration, Graceland stays the same. And now, you know, 50, 60 years on, it's still the same.
Yeah. Yeah, like a place lost till time. So yeah, it's nice while you can see the seasons change, things change, but they stay the same.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fergie said it, right? And big girls don't cry.
She did.
Yeah.
All goes back to Fergie.
Yes. I love the first day that Priscilla moves to Graceland and she's putting out her toiletries. And like she has like such a 14-year-old girl thing, but like an eczema cream, a nail polish, and a Chanel No. 5. And then, you know, we see her, you know, she has like no makeup then. And, you know, that's not Priscilla that we know. who's at like giving birth and putting on the eyeliner.
Yeah. I really do love the transformation. Like I don't know, her eyeliner getting bigger and bolder.
Yeah. When I first watched this movie, my immediate first Google after leaving the theater was, did Elvis have a foot fetish? Yes, he did.
Oh, really?
Oh, is it because he puts her foot in his mouth that one time?
Well,
movie,
so the
or?
very first shot of this movie is her feet, and I was like,
Yep.
well, we're the Nickelodeon documentary just came out, so it's on the mind. When I see feet, I'm like, what's going on? And I'm like, Sophia's an ally. Why would she do this if Elvis didn't have a foot fetish? And so I had to Google, and he did.
Wow.
Also, Sophia, well, in Lost in Translation, it's when there's like a scene of Scarlett Johansson's character really bored in the hotel. She does say something to the effect of like, what's it with like young girls wanting to take pictures of their feet? And there is something very young, feminine, like the female experience is also your feet. I don't know
like
why.
looking down at your feet.
Well, it's that thing of like, when you're first realizing you can be sexualized and like, oh, even my feet, my disgusting, smelly feet can be sexualized. Awesome. Cool. Like I don't feel safe, Yeah. But that's interesting.
I feel like I'm gonna go on a foot rabbit hole after this now. Well, because I do.
In what way?
Well, no, I'm just like curious because just like the Sofia Coppola's choices in that way, just because I thought it was interesting because there's a few scenes. It's like the very beginning, and then when she's like just chilling, her feet are up, and I'm like, it made me think, but yeah,
Well,
that's so interesting.
Put in movies much anymore on purpose. Because of how feet have been sexualized in our media.
I think some actors even have foot doubles, probably. Just
Sure.
Smart.
Yeah.
Are these Kaylee Spaney's feet?
We have to investigate.
Oh. I guess as someone that doesn't have a foot fetish, I'm like, yeah, what's wrong with feet, guys? But I get it.
I was watching this movie with my roommate. He kept bringing it up. I'm like, buddy, you're the one making it weird. Like,
No, it was intentional. The first shot is of a foot. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just intention.
Sure. I guess so.
Crazy.
But I will make fun of Ben for that.
Sure.
Not to harp on feet. I'm just thinking.
Sure. No.
Well, in my head, Sofia Coppola's arch nemesis and Fiona Apple's for that matter is Quentin Tarantino. That's not based on anything, but just,
I mean, they similar generations. They comment on the same stuff. Yeah.
But he loves feet. And I love that if, the first shot is like an homage, not an homage, but like Elvis liked feet. It is funny that Sofia Coppola is doing like the female gaze on feet.
It definitely makes the particular sexualization of this teenager still creepy, and adds to the unsettling nature of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Winsor, how did you feel about Priscilla?
About
Just the movie.
The movie, I love it. It's this kind of trap that's been laid for her, and she has no idea, and she has no way to have any idea. Just going into a relationship with such different power dynamics.
I don't know though. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off. I just feel like there's so many signs.
Oh, I mean, I would have done exactly the same thing that she did. Possibly today. If Jacob Elordi, wanted me to move in. It's so quiet too. I think even his performance is quiet, even when he's yelling, even when he hits her, and to be able to build that sense of unease while giving quiet performances, I think is something that takes a lot of intention. And it's that brave thing that she does in her movies where she's willing to take time and like let a scene sit. And my favorite part of the movie is the scenes where she goes back to school, because it always is so kind of it's directly compares against her scenes out with Elvis, you know, and like, would you focus on your schoolwork if you were going to the casino tonight? With the
True.
No.
And wait, we didn't even talk about him giving her pills.
Oh my God, yeah, like that's terrifying.
She has
And
to stay awake.
absolutely what I would have done as a teenager if a hot guy started handing me pills. It's like so complete and so subtle, his kind of dominating of her life. And I found that to be, you know, frightening and yet elucidating about like how times have changed, how it's important to make sure that your teenage daughter is not dating an adult man, like no matter who he
Yeah,
is.
extremely important.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
and it nobody is making nobody is making the most obvious mistake, and yet she ends up in such a kind of scary situation. And what is so incredible about this movie and why I think it was able to be made and why Priscilla Presley signed off on it is that she gets out of it just by speaking her mind.
Mhm.
You know, she takes that power. She takes what she can to get her in a position where she can be like, I'm leaving. Like, this
Yeah.
is not good for me. And to see her come to that conclusion is such a satisfying end to a situation that is rarely captured on film. Something so scary, something so obvious, something that, you know, brings to mind like the parents of the Michael Jackson accusers and like really horrible stuff, and then have it end with a woman being like, I'm taking control of my life. Like, to have it end with something so normal as a resolution is really powerful. And that's, you know, why Sofia Coppola's ability to let time pass is so important, because these horrific situations usually do end like that. You know, not all movies end with a shootout. Not all movies end with a screaming match. Like, you know, when I think back on like the worst situations I've been in my life, how did I get out of it? Like, I talked my way out of it, and I was like, I'm going to leave. And this movie does a really good job of showing that. And him, you know, conked out in the car, high.
Yeah,
Which
he's such a mess as time goes on.
Yeah, and that, you know, that's I think the peak of his performance is just like his kind of being checked out all the time.
Mhm.
I loved it. I loved the movie.
I love that we get so, to your point, like so caught up with Priscilla in this, like the highs and lows of like being this young girl introduced to a life of fame, but not really having any autonomy, and seeing it turn into such a trap and a prison for her, and then just a simple, you know, realization of self.
Yeah.
and that growth, and it's really subtle. Also, like hearing women that like we know in our lives that are older now talk about like in the 70s, like
Yeah.
it was just like a little bit of freedom and autonomy they had, but it opened up so many doors for them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But can we talk about the ending scene of I Will Always Love You playing?
Oh my God.
Love it. I love that it's Dolly Parton's version.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about like not using Elvis's songs. And this is like, you know, an old country song that is like obviously, you know, music influences and shapes like ourselves, like each other. And like it's just kind of awesome that she like ended the movie on a different country star, like who is huge, has her own theme park, like is, you know, in many ways very similar, but instead of being an asshole, she's like the greatest woman on earth. I like love Dolly, and like she makes powerful music that is, and she's incredibly talented, and it's like, yeah, like what did Elvis even do? Like make a couple songs, who cares? So I thought it was good.
Well, Elvis wanted to record I Will Always Love You. And Dolly Parton she has always been like, I want to have 100% writing credits on my song. And, you know, the story goes that Elvis thought that a woman couldn't really convey the emotions that the song deserved. And Dolly declined for him to record her song. And now it's in this film.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the ending of Elvis doing Unchained Melody, which is also kind of like a big bravura song, like I Will Always Love You. And to have it end on such a different note on the same person from a very similar song was very compelling. Just kind of her looking back on him fondly is such a nuanced point, and to do it with such a famous song sung by such a famous person in such an obvious way kind of conveys it makes you reflect on the movie at the end. It's what the end of a movie should be.
And these lyrics, really do, it seems like, describe Priscilla's inner monologue perfectly as she's leaving Graceland and Elvis.
Yeah. Doesn't it say like, you're leaving me with just bittersweet memories? Like, it doesn't exactly say a lot of positives, but she still is like, I love you.
She'll always love
She'll
him.
always.
And that's Sofia Coppola for you. I mean, that's the magic of a great needle drop. Is like being able to make it feel like the song was written for the movie when it's like such a famous song.
I feel like it's also a little bit about like self-love,
Yeah.
like she's continuing on with her life. And like she gets to have these emotions forever. So I think that's important.
That's growth, baby. When you're like, I will always love you, but you're not good. Like, I don't have to be with you. That's
Yeah.
power.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
hard.
I love. Oh, sorry.
Oh no.
I was just gonna say I love the conversation. Like when she decides to leave Elvis and he's like, am I losing you to another man? And she's like, no, you're losing me to a life of my own.
Yeah.
And I just felt like that was so powerful. And it's like, yes, because you're like rooting for her this whole time, and then she finally is like breaks free, and
Yeah.
it's so satisfying.
Yeah, it's really and it's the magic trick of like what's brave about the movie is that it is just about their personal lives from when she meets them to when she leaves, and just lets it go.
Yeah. My dad's biggest issue with biopics is that they always try to cover way, way too much. And so the fact that this is so so simple and just telling like one conflict of these two people is like really good and like makes for a much more like watchable or like a much more like plot centric movie, or what do I mean? Concise. Yeah, it's concise. It lets you think about it as a story instead of like a bunch of stories, and like it's just more digestible that way, I think.
Definitely. Well, biopics kind of, and have you guys seen Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story?
Yeah.
Of course.
There's some, standard like beats that a typical biopic hits,
Yeah.
which are funny now.
Yeah.
Because
literally
there's
think I literally
go
think
ahead.
that influenced biopics, and like they are different because that movie came out.
because this movie was like, stop it. Yeah.
Well, watching Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann one, I was like, oh, it's getting a little Dewey Cox.
Definitely him in when he hears the gospel, or not the gospel, the other music for the first time, and he like has like a moment where he's like
yeah.
basically it's like, yeah, no, it's like kind of not that deep, bro.
Or every time Dewey like gets introduced drugs, that's very like Elvis.
Oh, I love that. To me, that's so Airplane though.
Come on, Priscilla, you don't want to do this. You don't want to take these pills.
It's the cheapest drug around, but it's got to be addictive, right? No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what do we think of the modern day biopic? Because I like this Priscilla like quiet moment in time way better than the traditional.
To me, it reflects. You ever seen Steve Jobs? Spike Jonze's movie. I think that was the real beginning of like the flash in the pan biopic that's become quite popular. And conversely to like the Bohemian Rhapsody, I feel like there are two. There are like your critical darling biopics like Priscilla, and then there's the Elvis and Bohemian Rhapsody and all these movies that are like, we are the totemic piece on a musician that are coming out now. Bob Marley got a movie that just came
The
out.
new Amy Winehouse. Have you guys seen that trailer?
Looks horrible.
Yeah, I haven't seen many of them because I just haven't had any interest really. The only one that I saw was Elvis, and I only watched it because I was on a plane. But then I was like, oh, I love this. But the reason I really like Elvis is because to me, it did not try to tell the truth. It tried to tell like an Elvis inspired story. And so I thought it was really fun. And this, I mean, this is good. This kind of reminds me of Spencer,
Mhm.
Ooh.
about which is about a week or so in Diana's life. And so it's like, much more concise. And really you can get into the like emotion of what that person's going through. Like with so many biopics, it's just like we have to get through all the facts, and
It's all the
just
facts. Yeah.
so much time, and it's like interesting if you really like that artist, maybe, but if you don't, it's like, okay, why did I just like sit through a PowerPoint presentation on
Mhm.
this? Like I wanted to feel human emotion and like watch people interact with each other, and instead I got like just the information.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, I guess they have a time and a place, and obviously people still love them because Bohemian Rhapsody, like 5 years ago, won, a bunch of awards. But then you do get like a Spencer or Pablo Larraín's Jackie, which are like one moment, just quiet. I mean, it's a different vibe for sure.
It's so much more intentional. I mean, we are at a point in our culture where everything can be a movie, and there are many things that should be books. The entire life of an artist or a person should be a book, unless it's somebody you can really get out in a short period of time. And a movie covering a week or even covering a decade like this one, it does a lot more to take your time with a piece. There's only so many scenes you can feasibly put in a movie, and if 2/3 of them have to be concerts, it's going to get really repetitive. And I prefer being able to like take a snapshot like this movie and have that arc, as opposed to I'm going to tell you everything you could possibly know about David Bowie.
Well, one biopic that I love is La Bamba, but that is like, Frankie Valli, he had a rise and fall in like 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So it's like a much more digestible piece. And the reason I think biopics are popular right now is because they're doing the musicians, and people like having that concert experience for the price of a movie ticket. And like nothing wrong with that necessarily, but like I really think we could like go about it in a different way.
I think they're going to start losing a ton of money on these.
Oh, they're so expensive.
Like,
Yeah.
and there's only so many artists that everybody in the world is like, yeah, I'd like to hear some of their songs for like an hour and a half.
Yeah. I guess it is expensive too to get the rights to a song for a
Oh, yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
So
And you have to get signed off by the artist unless you want to like pay them for all their songs to be used in a movie that makes them look bad.
right.
So they're always just gonna kind of be these puff pieces. Like there's not a lot of, I mean, unless you're Priscilla, you're not gonna do a lot of brave stuff concerning the artist in question.
Yeah, I definitely think too, in in a movie like Priscilla or Spencer or Jackie, you can do it on a smaller scale, smaller budget, in an artistic way. I think when you get into that territory of being like, oh, we have to, meet the estate or the artists, like every whim, it does turn into puff pieces. I think you're right. Because you can't destroy the legacy, man.
No, but what is so interesting about these women, or about frankly the artists that are being in bigger movies like this, is those quiet moments. If you want to reflect on what somebody's career or personal persona was, watch a documentary. If there's news clippings, if you want to learn everything you can about Diana, watch a documentary. If you want to watch the moments that were uncapturable, watch Spencer.
Yeah. We need True Hollywood Story again, or like Behind the Music. I think that would solve a lot of our biopic urges.
So much cheaper. Rami Malek could have had a better career.
Oh, man. Yeah, whatever happened after?
Rami Malek could have just been a talking head in a Queen. Yeah.
He'd be able to act in more movies.
Mhm.
Now he's in Bond movies and Oppenheimer. Man, it's not working at all.
Yeah. I don't know. I liked Bohemian Rhapsody though. I don't know if that's a hot take.
Oh, it just made me angry. Him crying, writing Bohemian Rhapsody as a song. I wrote off the whole thing after that.
Yeah. Maybe I need to rewatch just to see. I know there's probably some humor in it, and I know it's not like super accurate. So
I watched it at a time where like the cruising scene with Adam Lambert at a truck stop, I was like, this is like watching an anti-gay PSA. It was just so, by the numbers. But also I've changed, so maybe I'd like it better now.
I don't know. If you have better expectations, like that's usually when I hate a movie, it's when it doesn't meet my expectations. So
right.
like sometimes on the second watch, I'm like, I know what I'm getting into. I guess this is pretty
Now I know
good.
what it is. I am a huge Queen fan, so maybe
Yeah, I know.
it'd just be worth it to watch it like a concert.
Yeah.
That was the year of A Star Is Born. So to be honest, I was going to hate every single movie because I was like, you're getting in the way of Gaga winning an Oscar.
It's true.
I'm just always for the girls and for the gays,
Yeah.
Just like Sofia Coppola.
Yeah. It's true. She is.
But before we wrap this up, any like final thoughts on Priscilla?
I feel like I like this movie better the second time around, even. Like I liked it a lot in theaters, but just I don't know. It's so good. Like just Sophia, like the way that she directs and can tell someone's story. I don't know.
It's Coppola's best film in 10 years, in my opinion.
It's visually engaging. It takes a lot of time to tell you the story about this woman that does not, throw in your face or try to say too much or be about anything more than what it is. And I think that takes a lot of confidence. And you don't see that in every movie. And I am not shocked. It did not break box office records, but it does exactly what it set out to do in a way that very few movies do. And I find it compelling. And I'm definitely going to be rewatching it again many, many times.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also liked it more on the second watch because like she is very brave and just kind of like letting the story get told. Like you're not, like I said, I wasn't really sure when the movie was going to start on the first watch, and like having a movie like that and being confident that it will still be well received is like so incredible that she, had that confidence in herself and like had the talent to make it so. But on the second watch, when I like have a roadmap of where this is going to go, I think I enjoyed it a lot more because I was just like, yeah, I'm just taking it all in this time. And like, I'm not worried about like if we're going to make it to our destination because I know we do,
It's great having someone like Sofia Coppola as the director. Like she's my favorite director and I have so much admiration for her as an auteur. But like that trust of like if it's a film by her behind the wheel, I completely just trust the vision, and she takes us on this empathetic journey of Priscilla without painting. Like we get to infer a lot or feel a lot, but she's not vilifying Elvis or Priscilla. She's just taking us on a journey, and I trust her completely.
Yeah. Windsor's always accusing me of hating women directors.
What are you talking about?
because I was like nervous about this movie going in.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, where are we going? It's like she's got a plan. Mostly Windsor accused me of that when Greta Gerwig cast Ryan Gosling as Ken because
Right.
I don't like Ryan Gosling at all. But Greta was right, and I should just trust female directors. They know what they're doing. I'm allowed to be critical.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't hate women directors. It's just sometimes I'm nervous and I should trust women.
Hell yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like if we trust anyone like Sophia, just I don't know. She hasn't let us down yet,
So rare for a director. Although I have not seen On the Rocks.
Well,
It's a fun little caper.
Okay. All right.
sure.
But yeah, hard to. I mean, there's so many great directors that, like her father, who will absolutely swing and miss and make a real clunker. And so very impressive when you have somebody who you can trust every time out.
Sure. I even trust her though to make a clunker, to be fair. I'll go on that ride.
I would.
That's a real director.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, you're going to be like, this looks great. I could just watch this like silently without any plot. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the needle drops will be straight bangers.
Yeah. Yes. True.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was a real pleasure. You guys are so thoughtful.
Yeah.
So
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we had a great time. This is fun.
Thank you very much for having us on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where can everyone find you guys?
We're at Femme Features Pod on all social media, and then Feminine Features wherever you get your podcasts. So yeah, that's where you can find us.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you, Bree.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, yeah, this was fun.
Late to the Party is hosted by Nikki Jensen and Bree Picconi. Our podcast is produced by Grace Dunbar and edited by Bree.
That's me. Thanks for listening. Make sure to rate and review us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next week.
Bye.